The yes,
Hi, welcome to the podcast.
thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you. I would love to begin with you sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do.
All right. Well, my name is Ebony. I am by trade a licensed clinical therapist now. But of course, I do a little bit of everything. I do outpatient therapy. I do work for a health system, a children's health system in our area, and I am one of the shift supervisors there. Of course, I'm a NICU volunteer, the same organization. I'm a dance fitness instructor. I do other fitness classes, and I am an independent psychological evaluator. And I do outpatient and consulting and training and all those things. So everything social work, I dabble in just a little bit. Um, and you asked like about me, more about
Yeah, whatever else you would love to share. I love that you are involved in a lot of things, which is
this.
good.
I am very involved. I did take the certification course, your course last March,
Yeah.
to be a bereavement, prenatal, postnatal doula.
Mhm.
I have I have my one of my first clients that is still pregnant that I've been working with. And then I have been a bereavement doula for a couple of ladies who have experienced a loss this year. Um, but I think in a nutshell, what I've gathered about myself, at least in the past 3 years of my journey, is I think I just care. I care about people. I care about things, and I really care about how other people feel. And
Mhm.
that's something that I'm learning to embrace more, because I used to view that as like a downfall. Like you can't care too much, it's gonna hurt. And it's like, well, you experience one of the worst hurts of your life, and you're like, that caring thing doesn't go away. Maybe it's not
Mhm.
such a bad thing after all.
Absolutely.
So
No, that's
yeah.
awesome. So happy that we have you here. But you have a story, obviously. Let's talk about your journey to motherhood. And I would love for you to just take us back on that journey and share with us your miscarriage story, your stillbirth story, and really what led you to the work that you're doing. Because I think a lot of the work that you're doing on how you give back and show up in these spaces stems from your journey to becoming a mother. So I would love for you to share.
I do think so too. So my journey to becoming a mother started in 2010. I was a fourth year senior in college, and I was with a person that I just knew I was going to be with forever. We were expecting our first child, and I think that was probably the beginning of this conflict that I have versus what I think I want for me and what I want for the people that I bring into the world. And that's where my learning journey began. So in that course, I realized, he was great. He's all that, but I don't know that I will want to raise a child with him. So I ended the relationship. And I think like shortly after I started to spot, and I'm like, oh, this is weird. What does this mean? I had a doctor's appointment already coming up. I was about 8 weeks, and when we went, there was no heartbeat, and they scheduled me for a DNC. I think that was probably one of the scariest, most traumatic experiences up in my life to that point, because they didn't explain to me what was happening with my body. They didn't explain, what pills I was taking. She just told me to get some pills from the pharmacy and then come back at 7. And she said, take them when you get home. She didn't tell me that I was going to, in essence, be in labor. Um, I had never felt pain like that. Still couldn't quite understand what was happening with my body, what was going on. And I did that alone. And I finally called my cousin and said, I think I need help. I don't know how I'm going to be able to drive myself back to the hospital. And she came and got me. And, I was back and forth to the bathroom, which wasn't explained to me that that's something that was going to happen. And I do remember passing that baby, and I remember holding it and playing with it and going, this is good, like what is this? And then I went later for the DNC. They said it was a good process. There was nothing left and everything was fine. And that's when I realized what I was holding in my hands was my child. And that's when everything fell apart for me. But it came from me still piecing together. And that was 2010. So I knew nothing about loss. I knew really nothing about pregnancy. I barely understood what a period was at that point, you know. So that was very hard. And I didn't have anyone in my circle or in my family that could love on me. So I got the typical responses of, you know, maybe it's for the better, or, you know, you probably weren't ready. And what were you going to do with a child? Those types of things that just do not validate your loss, but more of almost blame you. Like, this happened to you because you shouldn't have had a baby. And it's like, well, gosh, I wasn't like, who, like, when should I have a baby since you guys know everything? But I think that's when I realized, you know, answers. There was no answer, there was no reason, there was no cause, but I definitely felt responsible. I blamed myself. Was it that one bag I picked up? Was I not supposed to eat hot Cheetos? Like, all the things that you think. And the person that I was dating, you know, I remember asking, do you think I made this happen? And he said, well, yeah, how else would this go wrong? And that was just devastating to me. So that was something I carried for a very long time. I did name that child. I named him Amir. And I just assumed it would be a boy. I don't know why. And so that kind of was a staple for a brief period. And I think my life just took a different turn. So I started looking at relationships differently. I started putting better boundaries in place with relatives and really started trying to figure out what my goals are for my life. So I moved to Virginia, went to school, met a guy who I'm married to now, and we were expecting our very first child that following year. And my firstborn was born in 2012. That pregnancy was fine until I went for a checkup. I think it was about 3 days before my due date, and they told me that my blood pressure was high and to go to the emergency room. And everything from there was just pure violation, in my opinion. I didn't understand what they were doing. They didn't explain. They didn't confirm whether or not I had high blood pressure. They just proceeded with the induction. And I just remember thinking, well, did my labs come back? Or are you sure I have high blood pressure? Like, what's happening? So that birth was very hard in that I didn't understand what they were doing. I didn't really understand why things were going the way they were. They didn't really prepare me. So they inserted some pills into my cervix and they explained this is to make it soft. The first round of pills didn't work, so we had to do that again. And then they inserted a balloon. And when that finally popped, my cervix was so swollen from them forcing it open that he couldn't fit anyway. And I ended up having to have a C-section, but that was after I labored and suffered for 3 days because I'm thinking I'm going to push this baby out and couldn't push the baby out. And that probably caused me to have high blood pressure, which caused me to need like magnesium, which I didn't realize what it was. You know, you see it as a vitamin supplement, but hospital grade, whatever, it just makes your body feel like you were hit by a truck. So everything hurt. You can't get out the bed. You can't move. You can't do anything. And no one out of every single one of the doctors, and it was a teaching hospital, so there was an attending, there was a bunch of residents, there were a bunch of interns, and they kept coming for different things. So now I'm seeing the cardiovascular doctor. I'm seeing all these people come in and out my rooms, and no one's explaining what's happening with my body or why I'm having to take these medicines. I'm Googling Pitocin to try and figure out what things are, all the while being in just a whole lot of pain. So after 3 days, they finally check or try to get me to push, and they realize my cervix is swollen, so I have to have a C-section. That went as well as can be expected. I think I remember being awake for that. I remember meeting him for the first time. It was definitely a whirlwind of emotion. And that was the adjustment to motherhood in the hospital, because here I am. I'm a self-preservationist, so I am my body. When things don't feel right, I don't feel right. I can't function. So being in a position where now I have this pressure that if my blood pressure doesn't go down, then I have to stay here. And if I don't learn to care for this baby, I can't go home. And I was so uncomfortable. I was in pain. My milk was coming in, and just all the things that, no one prepared you for in the birthing classes that I took. um, and I think that's when I realized there was nothing to do, but there was so much to be done. So the first few cries, you realize you know what they mean, because I just can't even describe how I knew what each cry meant or how he wanted to be held. So I think that's when I was able to tap into my instinctual nature of caring, because I really took the time to figure out how he felt, and then that would tell me how to address it. And then that thrust me into this protective advocate role. I was already into social work a little bit, had really found my footing or anything that I really liked about it yet. But after the firstborn, then comes the first clinical internship, and it was like, oh my God. In retrospect, the pieces started coming together. We welcomed a second child about a year and a half later, and that child was also a C-section. The pregnancy for him was different. So I was very intentional about going to a smaller practice. I wanted a doctor that looked like me, that could talk to me and look me in my eyes and not just come in a room and leave. And that prenatal experience was very great for a number of reasons. The first reason was, not only did she look at me, she sat down while she talked to me. She asked for my records right away. She was really looking into things and reading things and scheduled me to come back the next week so she could have time to look at and ask questions, because I was very clear with her. I don't even know if I have hypertension still. They didn't treat me for it. When I went back for my follow-up, I didn't have to take any medicine. I don't even know. I really can't tell you what happened and if I even had hypertension. So I appreciated that she took the time to look through the record and really try and figure things out. And she assured me that even if you did have it, we don't know now, but we're going to proceed with caution here. So she did extra testing. She monitored me very closely. If I had a concern, there was something to do. So if my blood pressure looked funny, she had me do an extended lab where she would collect urine for days, or, have me come in every day at certain different times to get a viewing of my blood pressure, instead of me coming in once a month and she's saying, yeah, you have hypertension. I'm like, isn't there a follow-up test to find out? Because I just walked over here. Of course I have high blood pressure when I get here. So then she started to let me come. She let me come right back to the room where I can take a nap and rest. And she had the music playing. Sometimes she would have a snack for me. And turns out I didn't have high blood pressure. I think that I was just so scared of having high blood pressure that while I was in a waiting room and walking over from my desk, I done worked myself up to have high blood pressure. And then after I see her and speak to her, by the end, she would take it and I didn't have it. So I think she realized that maybe I had some anxiety. And that was a whole lot different than treating me for hypertension. So I really, really, really enjoyed her. With that child, I went into labor, very quickly. I felt like it was progressing very fast, because it was that intense, every 30 seconds, and, the throwing up, all the things. And I get to the hospital and I'm only like half a centimeter dilated. And she happened to not be on call. And I had like an Asian doctor who, and at first was telling me to stay home and that I'm fine and to wait. And I just was like, here we go again. They're not listening to me. I'm not fine. These aren't coming every 3 minutes. They're not going away. I've never felt anything like this. This is serious. So I didn't listen to her and I went to the hospital anyway. And thank goodness I did. Even though I wasn't progressing at that point, they were coming every 30 seconds. And I did throw up, and I was able to get medicine early to be comfortable, because from midnight to 6, I was at about 8 centimeters. So it did go very quickly, but it was strong from beginning to end. It wasn't like a gradual, let's build up to this. And it just kind of frustrated me that by a telephone call, you could tell me that I should stay home and I'm probably fine. And I'm telling you how bad this feels. So that was a little scary because, of course, my doctor wasn't there. And the lady who delivered me was a Caucasian doctor, which I had met all the doctors in the practice because we have to. So she ended up being the one to deliver. And in retrospect, I still can't tell you why, because I was trying to have a vaginal birth. And before she got there, everything was going fine. The heart rate was fine. I was doing fine. For some reason, she decided that it was too risky and that the heart rate was dropping, even though no one had ever said that all night. In retrospect, I can't even remember if that was even a concern. It just seemed like she came to work that morning and she was determined to deliver that baby. So I ended up having a C-section again. And this one was different in that I tried to explain to her what happened with my first delivery. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew for a fact that after I labored for a while, when they numbed me for the C-section, I could feel nothing. They didn't give me an epidural. They gave me a spinal. And she said, well, this is enough. This should be enough. And I just remember feeling very scared because although I was numb enough, like for the epidural, I wasn't spinal numb. So I was scared that I was going to feel this. And of course, I'm on the table and I feel it. And I'm telling her, ouch, I feel that. Well, you don't feel that. You feel pressure. No, ouch, this hurts. And she's like, it doesn't hurt. She can't possibly feel this. And I can feel her cutting me open and it burned. And then after that, I was out. And I think it didn't really register what happened until much later. So my follow-up was also with this doctor after the delivery. And she comes in and she says, God, we had to put you to sleep. You kept reaching under the thing. And that's when I clearly remember I didn't reach. I told you that I can feel you cutting me. So here you come in because you don't know what I can remember. And you start with we had to put you to sleep because you kept reaching under the thing. Lady, I know what it means to get a C-section at this point. Why would I be reaching and touching? And how if my arms are spread out? And that's when I realized she just couldn't apologize. You were wrong. I told you that this wasn't enough. You could have gave me the spinal. I didn't need to be put to sleep. And I didn't like that because when he came out or when I woke up, it was all done. So I didn't get to see when they pulled him out and he looked at me. There are pictures of them showing me him. And I remember briefly, and I don't know if they woke me up for that part and then put me back to sleep, but that bothered me that I didn't get the beginning to end experience because she just wouldn't listen, that I could feel it. All you had to do is numb me so I could be awake when you pull my baby out and I can see him and I can have the experience that I want to have, not the experience that you want me to have. It makes me think that I probably could have pushed him out. She just didn't want me to, for whatever her reasoning was. So that follow-up appointment also was uncomfortable and I just didn't see her anymore. She was trying to convince me to start birth control, which that's fair. That's reasonable. I do not need to get pregnant right away. And I'm aware of that. However, I do want to breastfeed my child, so I can't take your pill. The other pill isn't guaranteed. And at this point, I'm nervous because if it does affect my milk, how am I going to feed this baby? I am not in a position to be spending $13 a can on formula at the time. I want to feed him. I know how to not get pregnant until I find something that works for me. And then she was pushing this Nouveau ring. She's showing me all these things. And I work for a Catholic organization. My insurance don't cover that. And she's telling me all the ways she can make sure I can get it and we can figure this out later. Really just pushing this NuvaRing after I told her I didn't want that. I didn't want a NuvaRing. I will marinate on how I want to help my body not get pregnant in this time of healing. But she just seemed mad, and I couldn't understand why she had feelings about my body at that point. So I didn't schedule to see her anymore. And then I was able to get back in with my doctor, who looked like me, who was patient with me, who all the things. And I explained that to her. I don't know what happened, but that doctor left shortly after that. So she was gone. So then we have, our lovely years of raising two boys, and it's all beautiful. And then I'm pregnant again, of course. They're all like stair steps. And I decided that this one would be the last one. And I couldn't say why. I couldn't describe why I felt it, but I knew that my body more than likely couldn't do it again. And I have absolutely no evidence to support that. It was just my gut feeling. That pregnancy was fine. I don't remember anything drastic happening except for me coming to a place as a woman, deciding how I want to be treated and how I want to be loved, and just acknowledging that this isn't a place that has space for me to live how I want to live, be a wife, and raise kids. Something has got to give. And at that time, I decided, I can be on pause. I just need one thing that I could look forward to that gets me through my day. And that was the gym. So I committed to the gym and committed to, being a mom in the moment. So at that time, everyone who knew me or saw me with 2 to 3 kids attached to me. So I became Ebony and the boys to the world. And I really enjoyed that time, like learning them, growing with them, playing. It almost took me back and helped me heal some childhood stuff that I didn't even remember. So Avery comes. That I planned that delivery a little better because I wanted to make sure I had my doctor delivering. I knew I didn't want to try to push again, so there was no need to go to the end and go through labor and all that torture. So I scheduled my C-section with my third pregnancy. I ate my last meal at midnight, enjoyed it, slept all night, rested, got up late, went to the doctor, got checked in, had me a nice book reading The Body Keeps the Score while waiting for my turn. I was able to be awake the whole time with her while she's delivering. We're laughing, we're cracking jokes in there. And I just remember when she started to cut through something where they used like the fire. And I was like, what's that smell? And I just remember the anesthesiologist going, oh my gosh, I don't want to make you mad, but I have the perfect joke because I had just been roasting all of them all morning. He said, you promise you won't get mad? I was like, I won't get mad. He was like, you said what's cooking? You. And we all just fell out laughing. I think that was the quickest C-section that I can remember. He was out within minutes. He was crying and everyone's cheering and we're all happy to find out, the anatomy, because I didn't find out during the ultrasounds. I wanted to be surprised because I just knew one of them was going to be a girl, but didn't happen. And that was great. So because I worked at that particular hospital at the time, we had a practitioner who did healing touch, and I saw her throughout my whole pregnancy. Oh my goodness, it's like magic because I had so much back pain and she didn't even have to touch me and it all went away. I'd be drooling on that table and my body felt great. And then we had a lady who played the harp, and they had a vibroacoustic harp therapy table where you lay on this table and it had the different paddings, and she would play these beautiful songs, and certain paddings will light up and vibrate on different pressure points in your body. So I did that my entire pregnancy. So after delivery, while we were recovering, the healing touch lady came and did healing touch on me and the baby. And we were both just like just out. the vibroacoustic harp therapy lady came. She put the padding under me in the bed and played. So that baby, he ate all that up. He loved it. And I believe that C-section, I didn't even need any pain medicine after the initial Motrin drip. And I think it had a lot to do with just the healing and self-care part after in the hospital. That particular delivery was, again, the recovery was great. They already, I went to the cafeteria this time. I was so prepared because I knew which foods I liked at breakfast and I know what they give the patient. So I went down and let them know my delivery date so they can bring me my normal breakfast that I like, that I order and pay for. So that was ready for me. They ended up moving me to a different room because I was too cold. It was just everything you would want it to be. And after that, I remember thinking, at my checkup, now's the time to think about birth control because it's going to happen again. And I feel like this went very well. I planned it very well, but I honestly don't know that my body could take it again. And I still can't figure out why I knew that or why I felt that. So I did go to a different practice after delivery to talk about the birth control because they were out of network. And it was just going to be too expensive to get I forgot. I wanted a copper IUD or something that seemed like the safest option at the time. It would have been all out of pocket because of my insurance. And it was going to be like $1,700. So I'm on maternity leave without pay because short-term disability is a joke. By the time they respond, it's time to go back to work. And I just didn't have $1,700. And I was scared of debt because, in my early years, you play with credit cards and then you just feel trapped when you can't pay it back. So I didn't want to finance it and end up in the situation. So I do remember just sitting in my car and crying. And I can't really say why. I just knew that I was probably going to get pregnant again. And I just didn't feel like my body would be able to do it. So we fast forward, not 2 years quite. I believe my third born child was about 10 months when I found out that I was pregnant. My 2-year-old was, in little preschool and he just wasn't doing well. He didn't like it. And I didn't like that they treated him like he was a big kid, like going to the principal and calling me and him having to be isolated. And I'm like, he's 2. What is he doing? And then I realized, in that process, I created a behavior plan that we all use, grandma, me, the teacher. And what I noticed, she started to use it as a weapon. It got to the point where I'd pick him up and we'd go over his smiley faces for the day and he would say no and walk away at 2. And I said, so she must be hanging this over his head all day. And so I would just go to the school and just watch and not tell her I'm coming. And I see all the kids playing, they're pushing each other, they're all being rough. And my little kid's on the swing, minding his business. She stops what she's doing and she's like, where is such and such? Where is he? And he was doing nothing. So I knew then that he can't stay at this school. And that means I can't stay at this job. And then that means I need to find another way to work. So I started looking for other work. I found a part-time job in the evening so my husband could work during the morning. And so I left my job and I got to be home all day with my 2-year-old and my 10-month-old. And then I found out that I was pregnant again. This one was very different in that I wasn't scared or mad or disappointed. I just didn't feel what I felt all the other times. You know how you just go, well, it's happening. Yay, let's start getting ready. I didn't really get ready. I stayed very committed to my schedule with the kids, with the gym, with my work. And I didn't really spend a whole lot of time just wallowing in the pregnancy part of, oh, my clothes don't fit, oh, this and blah, blah. I just would just quietly move on to the next size or quietly, get my heating pad. Like it was just what happens. So I was clearly pregnant. I was showing and all these things. And I went to an all women's gym. So every day I had the same conversation. Oh, how far along are you? Blah, blah, blah. How many more do you want? And I just remember this time and not being enjoyable. I remember feeling like you see me every day. Stop touching me. Stop asking me the same question. But I didn't know why I felt that way. I didn't know why I couldn't just, I don't know why I felt different. And I noticed about maybe around the 13th week, after you get through the day and do all the things, that was my time to bond. Like I would come up and I would talk like, I really am happy you're coming. I do really love you. I'm so sorry that I didn't get to talk to you today or that I had so much to do. So I had already felt myself like not prioritizing the pregnancy, where before, all day I'm complaining about, I wish I was home. I just want to lay down with my pregnant belly, or, oh, I'm just eating all day. I'm starving. It was just, everything was about this pregnancy. And this last fourth time, it wasn't about it. It was about everything else. And then at the end of the day, I would have to explain, like, I do love you. We are happy you're coming. I'm so sorry that the day got away from me. I'm so sorry that I couldn't take the day to just eat and wallow. Like I felt like I was doing him a disservice already. So we fast forward to week 24. I went to a different practice this time because I did want to have my tubes tied. I decided I'm not doing birth control, forget that. I'm just gonna have my tubes tied this time. So I had a different job, changed my insurance, went to a whole nother hospital that could perform that, because they couldn't even do that procedure in the hospital that I wanted to deliver at. And I had a doctor. She looked nothing like me. She looked young. She didn't have kids. So I was already like, oh God, here we go. How's this gonna go? She was very nice, seemed very knowledgeable. Fast forward to week 24, I was not feeling good. I felt like I had high blood pressure. I called the office to just kind of describe how I was, just having a headache and just feeling really tired. I just felt like my skin was dry. I just didn't feel good. And, she said, well, we just saw you. Your blood pressure was fine. Try and drink more water and see how you feel. So I order a Camo pack and I'm like chugging back Camo packs. And all of a sudden I start to feel better. I'm like, well, maybe I was just dehydrated. And she never scheduled me for follow-up, never recommended me come in. And because I drank the water and I started to feel better, I'm like, well, maybe maybe I'm fine. There was still no swelling, no overt signs that anything was wrong. And then I think about 2 weeks later, I just remember waking up on a Sunday and feeling really good, like myself, like I wasn't pregnant, like just feeling really good. I had a good workout that day. I remember the picture I took of myself, with my belly, and I'm like, I feel like, gosh, this is the best workout ever. Nothing held me back or all these things. So Monday rolls around, everything's fine. I feel like it was Tuesday at work. I used the bathroom and wiped and noticed like dark. It wasn't fresh blood, it was dark. And so, of course, you go to Google and I'm like, oh, the mucus plug. Do people lose that? And then you read, oh, yeah, you can lose that. It can grow back. I did contact the doctor on the little portal and let her know I think I lost my mucus plug. And she's like, well, that's pretty normal. A lot of people lose that. It could regenerate itself. And I'm like, oh, that's fine. And then I had therapy on Wednesday. And Wednesday I was cramping a little bit, not a lot, just a little. That was like a whirlwind day. I had both of the kids. I was babysitting someone else's kid. I had therapy. And I just remember that day feeling at peace, like, okay, I think this is just what my life is right now. Nothing is terrible. I'm adjusting. We'll be fine. And I went home and I'm like, these cramps really are starting to bother me. I think I should go to the emergency room. And I remember my husband saying, well, you go, I'll stay with the kids. And I was like, that's stupid. I think we both need to go. And he couldn't comprehend why we both needed to go. And I couldn't comprehend why I was telling him that we both needed to go, because that was never the case any other time. And I remember pulling out and driving myself to the emergency room and thinking, I think he's gone. And I was like, no, don't tell yourself that. Tell yourself the opposite. So that would be true. Because again, at that moment, I had no evidence to suggest that my baby would not be there. So I get to the hospital and It's crowded. I walk in, I'm feeling pretty fine, minus the little cramping that I was feeling. But they took my blood pressure and it was through the roof. And they're like, maybe it's not right. Let's just get you up to labor and delivery. And I'm smiling and talking to people along the way, and we're laughing and joking. And I get up there and they're like, oh, you clear. No, you're fine. We've had 5 admissions today. Everyone has high blood pressure. You're walking, you're talking. It was probably our machine. So I go and use the bathroom, and, they get me all on the bed, get me connected to monitor me, and they check my blood pressure again. And it was even worse than it was downstairs. And they're like, okay, don't get off the bed because you can have a stroke. And I'm like, stroke? What the hell? So now I'm like, what do they mean stroke? Why would I have a stroke? What is wrong? So then, they get a doctor. My doctor happens to be on call. She's on her way, but they snagged the attending that was on at that point to do an ultrasound. Because of course she's doing a Doppler, and she's like, oh, I can hear a heartbeat, but, oh, maybe that's your heartbeat. Oh, maybe we just need to do the ultrasound. And then she's like, oh, there it is. I finally found it. But I'm like, that sounds like the same thing you found the first time. That was my heartbeat. So I don't know if she couldn't find it and she just didn't want to scare me in that moment, or if she really thought she found it. So when they did the ultrasound, I think I knew before he said anything that my baby was gone. He was there, full body, you can see, but there was like no movement. And he was like not laying on his back like you see in a normal ultrasound. He was like on the other way. And I was like, uh-oh. So then, that doctor did say, I'm so sorry. There is no heartbeat. I think your baby passed away. And I said, oh, okay, thank you. Just still not registering. So in walks my doctor, and she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, but let me take a look just to confirm. And so she confirmed, and she's like apologizing, and she feels very bad. And I'm like, it's okay, I understand. And she's like, your blood pressure is a big concern, but because the baby has already passed, we can be a little bit more aggressive in how we treat your blood pressure. And I remember her saying, I remember telling her, well, no, thank you, it's okay. And she said, well, it could be fatal. And I was like, I understand. I guess it's just, it's my time. He's passed. It's my turn to die. I think this is just where we are, but I thank you guys for all that you tried to do. And she's looking at me like, what the hell are you talking about? Is your husband here? Is he coming? And I was like, husband? Oh, snap. Did anybody call my husband? And she's like, you have kids. What about your kids? And I was like, I do have kids. Okay, can you run it by me again? And in that moment, I was just like, dang, I didn't think I was going to die today, but I guess I am. And I didn't realize I didn't have to die, but it felt like I had already died. Like I was preparing myself to go. When she mentioned that I had other kids that needed me is when I remember that, oh, I'm not dead. Wait, what is happening? So they start calling family and stuff, and they're treating my blood pressure, trying to get it to I guess a place where they could deliver the baby. So then I had another conflict of, do I want them to treat my blood pressure, and do I want to deliver this baby? If I don't let them treat my blood pressure, then I stay pregnant, right? If I let them treat my blood pressure, then I have to like say goodbye and face this. But eventually they are treating my blood pressure. It didn't take too long for me to respond to medicine. And then it was time to deliver. She did want to confirm that I wanted a C-section. She was willing to let me push because she felt like it was going to come anyway at some point. And she reconfirmed with me whether or not I wanted my tubes tied. And in that moment, I remember thinking, definitely want my tubes tied. It was very difficult to get through all the other pregnancies because I kept thinking, I just got to get past 8 weeks and I'll be okay. How am I ever going to live trying to get to 26 weeks? Like, if this happens to me again, I don't know how I could get to this point. And then I also remembered feeling like my body can't do it anymore. It just can't do it. So we did deliver. And I did get my tubes tied. I do remember my husband saying, I don't think you want to see this. And I remember immediately being like, what the hell are you talking about? Give me my baby. So they did, give him to me, and I held him. And at that time, that particular hospital was like on its last leg of his bereavement program. And I was so grateful that I was there at that particular time, because the lady was retiring. She was done. But they had one more ceremony they were going to do. In that hospital, my nurse was great. She took pictures. She, did the outfits, and she let me know that as long as I'm in the hospital, I could have him with me the whole time. So I would keep him in the room. I didn't really want family. I just wanted to experience, remember everything about him, smell him, kiss him, say all the things that you say to your kids along the years in these 2 days. And then when I felt like he was getting too warm, I would give him back, and they would, let him cool off and bring him back to me. But in the hospital is when I started. They gave me all the pamphlets, and I was reading them like, what do I do? What do I do? So I was kind of preparing for my grief. I had a feeling that once I got out of there, it was going to fall apart. I don't remember crying until, being on the operating table and having to get the epidural, the spinal. I had to hunch over, and the nurse had to hold me, like hug me, so I wouldn't move. And that's when I finally cried. And she was like, I was wondering when you were going to cry. From the moment that they announced that he had passed away to the moment of getting to the OR was like 3 hours, not one tear. I had started to rationalize and process. So after that, it was very hard, very, very difficult. I remember that first night, I started to feel like I was hallucinating, like hearing things, seeing things. I definitely couldn't sleep. I didn't want to sleep because I felt like if I went to sleep, they would take him, like he would be gone, and then I would wake up and that would be the last time. So I didn't really want to sleep. I didn't want to do any of the self-care, because the first pregnancy, the nurse told me, the more I do for you, the longer you stay here. So this pregnancy, I was completely handicapped because I did not want to leave that hospital, because I didn't want to part ways with my baby. But of course, it didn't last long. I'm a therapist, and it just, all my coping skills started kicking in and preparing for the after. I was able to get him with that bereavement group where they did like a group cremation, and they would handle all the procedures. I would just have to show up for the ceremony. So I was able to get him with that, and that brought me some comfort in that I didn't want to just leave him by himself. So knowing that he was with other babies waiting for whatever was next in their journey was how I was able to leave the hospital that day. I didn't look at any of the pictures the nurse took before that, because I wanted to memorize him, and he changed in the course of those 3 days, and he looked very much like us, more in the second day. So that's what I wanted to remember. And when I got home, I think that's when it all started falling apart. And again, I would try and get through the day, and then about 4 o'clock every day, I'm like, did I do enough today? Like, was I awake enough? And then I would retreat to my grief, and I would just cry all night long. I do remember thinking maybe I should do a private ceremony. And I called a funeral home, and I just remember him saying, how old was the baby? And I'm like, oh, I was 26 weeks. He's like, oh, I can't charge you for that. And I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, if you go to the city, you get a voucher. They pay for that. You shouldn't have to pay for that. And I just felt like I can't make another call. That was very difficult. What do you mean that? Why wouldn't you charge me for that? Like, you charging everybody else. What are you talking about, sir? So I called one other place, and they was like, yeah, $500. And I'm like, that's reasonable. But again, I'm on maternity leave. We have 3 kids. We're still very young in our careers. And when they said we would go and pick him up for you and bring him here, it made me think about him having to be alone again. So right now he's in a group with other babies and they're all waiting. If I do this, then he has to be taken away, and who knows what happens in that time, and I can't be there. So I just decided to go with the group ceremony. It brought me a lot more comfort than having to do it by myself. We had the ceremony, it was about 2 weeks after the loss, so I had a little bit of time under my belt to, I don't even know, do nothing really. I wasn't in pain, at least at that point. It was very sad. My support circle really showed up. I was appreciative of that. My mom flew here. My husband's family was there. His church family was there. It was love and, supportive. And I do remember just that period of having my sister-in-law just come and talk about hair and eyelashes. And I didn't hear a word she said, but it was comforting for me to have her here because it meant that I was like alive still, because I didn't want to be alive anymore. And I do remember I had a friend who came. She didn't know what happened. And she came and she hugged me. And after that, it was all jokes. It was the first time I had laughed in like a month. And once I started laughing, I couldn't stop laughing. Once I smiled one time, I couldn't stop smiling. And just seeing my kids really for the first time, even though I was with them. But, at that time, Adrian was 1, and I remember he drank Kool-Aid because, of course, everyone else is caring for my kids while I'm kind of in this fog. And they gave him Kool-Aid and I don't give him Kool-Aid. And he threw it up and it got everywhere. And everyone's panicking and running. And I'm cracking up. And I think that's when everyone thought I had finally lost my mind. Because to that point, I was calm and just peaceful. And no one saw what I went through at night because they were gone by that point. But I laughed at him throwing up on everyone and it getting everywhere and everyone panicking. And I think after that day, when I finally laughed and smiled, the journey got a little easier for me. I was released from the hospital on a Saturday. I found a support group and I was there on Tuesday. And that was my monthly support for the next 2.5 years. That I went to the share group. That was probably the defining moment in my recovery from this and just going through the motions of not feeling alone and my caring nature. I think what made me keep going was the opportunity to show someone else some TLC in that moment. I didn't go back to therapy. I just couldn't, even to this day, I haven't seen her. I didn't want to deal with her feelings about my feelings about that day because I was in her office and I was cramping. I had to stand up and I just can't. I would much rather our last day be her remembering that I found peace, I left happy, we accomplished what I went to accomplish. I just couldn't go back to then say I had a loss and it happened this day and now you're a part of that and sorry to drop this on you, but can you therapize me some more? I didn't want to do that. And I think my therapy became the therapy I provided, because it removed me a little bit from my pain, but it was always a constant reminder because now I'm walking people through their pain. And it's not always the same kind of pain that I'm in. It's different, but it's there. Then I started to volunteer. I was already a hospital volunteer, I think, but it was like general, I can see all the kids. But then I went and got the NICU certification because in that moment, just from being in the groups, you realize there's so many other ways you can lose a child. I knew, the 8-week, the early, I knew the midway. I had never experienced someone that went full term and, have to go through this, or someone who delivered a live baby and they went to the hospital for an hour and then passed, stuff like that. So I started to explore more of the differences of what we all go through and how that pain is about the same, but just the journey is different. I got lots of comfort in volunteering in the NICU, talking and singing and reading to all the babies that you just don't know. And then, of course, from being a volunteer, and they knew I was a social worker, they kept encouraging me to apply. And I'm like, no, I have a job. It works perfect with my hours, so I can be with my family. So then they created a position with the same hours. And I'm like, oh God. Then it was more money. And I'm like, well. And then that place was, when I applied at the other place, they didn't know I was pregnant. I didn't tell anybody. And so to then be visibly pregnant and then not feeling good and then to have the loss and then to come back was hard. I think people, they just didn't know what to say, but they were helpful. But I think it was a time for me to grow. I had to go. So I went to the hospital, and I think probably in the first couple of weeks of me working, there was a NICU loss. And of course, I'm the only social worker in the hospital because NICU social worker is off, and I had to be there in that moment. And I was the woman for the job, apparently. And then it just became second nature. I started working closer with the chaplains, and all of a sudden, because of the nature of my shift, I was always the only social worker in the hospital from 8 to 8. So I had to cover the whole hospital. And that means that wherever it was, I was there, where I don't know that many social workers was going to that, and being able to instinctively know where to go for the parents and not be so hurt or emotional that I can't be there in a moment with them. But also I wasn't afraid to be around this person that passed away. It was almost like a peace. And I looked at that almost like an honor to be in those moments with them, because that's what you remember. And then I remembered how lovely my nurse was and how she sent me a card after. And then in the training that I took to become a doula, I just kept staring at this lady and she kept staring at me, and we had to wear masks. So I didn't know. And then I finally said, I think that was my nurse. So I finally went and asked if she worked at Centera Lee. And she's like, I did. I'm like, is your name this? And she's like, it is. And I was like, I think you are my nurse when I had my loss. And she's like, I knew I remembered you. So to me, that was like full circle confirmation of why I find myself in these moments, why I do the things that I do, why I volunteer my time in the way that I do, and why I care for people the way that I do. I think it's because in that time, so many people cared for me in so many different ways that I didn't realize I needed, and that I probably didn't value before. And that woke something up in me that I want to be caring. So that's what I do in everything that I do. But one thing that I learned is that it's okay to change. It's okay to be different. I think at my core, I'm going to always be the same person. But if outside of my core, all the things that happen outside of that, if it doesn't evolve, then what am I doing here? So if I have to look at me in 2022, approaching 2023, and I have to compare myself to me in 2017 with this devastating loss, I don't even recognize myself. And I almost don't even remember much about me before 2017. Now I can tell you my life story. I can tell you things that I've done, where I've been. I remember it all, but I don't quite feel as connected to her. It's almost like I can tell you the story as if I'm reading it in a book, like it wasn't me. And that's something I'm still getting to know and understand. How much of that is just womanhood and going through changes, and how much of that is just me blossoming from this different place that was really, was it really all my grief, or was this just a journey in general? I think my heart burst open with that very first pregnancy. My heart burst even wider with the very first live birth. And I can't say that the loss didn't affect me, but it didn't make my heart smaller, colder, harder. I feel like it made it bigger, wider, softer, and more inviting. So I'm always grateful, and I think about Austin all the time. Of course, the tattoos came in at a time where you couldn't feel, and I got my first tattoo in honor of him. And I'm like, gosh, I don't feel anything. I must feel really bad. Like the emotional pain is that great that I don't feel none of these tattoos. Oh, I should get another one. And then I noticed over the years, they started hurting again. And I was like, okay, I think I'm back. I think
You're back feeling again, right?
yeah, I think I'm feeling stuff again. Oh my gosh. No more tattoos. What was how did I do that?
Right.
But yeah, I'm very grateful for the journey. I really, really, really love him. And I thought that, you have your child and you're like, oh, I just love them. It's indescribable. But you see them every day, you smell them, they're doing things to just make you love them. It is another love when you didn't really get to meet them. You didn't
Mhm.
get to see them do anything. And they're not here with the fat legs and walking and falling and drooling and, getting that oxytocin going. But the thought of him gets the oxytocin going. And how I'd like to repay him for what he's given me is by making someone else have an opportunity to feel that way, whether
Mhm.
that be about their life, their love, anything. So that's usually how I honor and carry Austin with me everywhere I go.
Oh, I love that. Just want to honor your story and your journey. And I thank you for sharing it in so much detail because I think people need to know that even with having a loss and having live children, you still can have other losses. And the grief from one child, even when you have children that are physically here on earth, it still is there. And you still carry it with you. So you said that so profoundly. I love your journey. I love where you are. I love how God has orchestrated this for you. Sometimes we don't realize some of the things that we're going through is for a bigger purpose. And I feel like you found that and that you're living it every day. So just keep shining, sis. But
Thank
I
you.
would love for you to ask to just wrap this up to really encourage our listeners. So we're in 2023. This episode is gonna go live in 2023. And everyone may have a goal who's listened to the podcast of growing their family or getting pregnant, staying pregnant, bringing a healthy baby home. What encouraging words can you leave with our listeners as they navigate this new year?
Encouraging words is, I think if you put your mind to it and you want it bad enough, you will do whatever it is your heart wants for you to do. So if that is getting pregnant, you be intentional with everything that you do. I think when things don't work out the way that we want it, we tend to want to blame ourselves and hit the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. So one thing that I do is I try to hit all the things in advance with the expectation that this still may not go the way I want it to go, but I will feel a lot better knowing that I tried everything I possibly could and that this didn't happen, but it doesn't mean that something else great can't happen. So I keep myself open. And when I try to feel in the moment and I feel out loud and I feel how I need to feel to get through that moment. And a lot of times I create a new goal. So this made me feel, maybe very down. In 4 months, I want to feel happy and motivated and joyful. So what do I do in the meantime? So I plan little things in between to keep me going. And it can be as minute as, well, if I have lunch at this place every Friday, it brings me joy and it'll let me do A, B, C, and D because this will be my reward. So I've created this system of balance where I can put my nose to the ground and push through things. And then I could also, say, I can't do it today. I can't take a minute of this, and just honoring where I am on both spectrums of that journey and knowing that people do care and I care. And because of that, I will get through whatever it is that I want to get through. If it's hard, I'm going to get through it. I just need to find my support, and be honest with myself. It'll work out. I just try to remember it will all work out. It's going to work out.
I love that. Love that. It will all work out. So
Mhm.
where can we connect with you after this episode?
Well, I do have Instagram. I'm Ebony Lawton on Instagram and Facebook. I I'm around. You got to find me in real life because I'm exploring so much. I love being able to reach and connect and have access to people, and I love for them to have access to me. But what I've learned in this journey is sometimes access becomes an obligation, and then you don't get to show up in the world how you want to show up. You have to show up how the world needs you. And if I'm showing up how I'm needed and not honoring how I feel, then I'm not showing up. And I didn't go through all this and deal with all this to not show up. So you can find me in real life. I'm at a gym near you, on an island near you, at a retreat near you, restaurant near you. But I do have social media, and I am active on there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Ebony, for sharing your story and your light with us. And we will be connected. Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yes.
Bye.